All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this day 6 of Festival. My name is Maria Belcher, and I'm the Executive Director at Festival Charleston, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program, the Brickscape Artist Panel Discussion and Live Audience Q&A. With me, I have this year's 4 participating artists, Craig Auge, Joshua Gambetta, Luisa Caldwell, and Nicole Westfall, along with Project Director Jack O'Hearn. You'll get to hear from each of them individually. Jack is going to lead the panel discussion. And then during this discussion, please feel free to go ahead and type any questions that you have into the chat box, in addition to when we get into the live Q&A portion. We'll be checking those and keeping stock of them throughout the panel discussion so we can make sure to get all of those addressed at the end. I just want to encourage everyone to check out the full schedule of events for Festival at festivalcharleston.com. We still have 2 full days of Festival left after today. And I'd also like to give a profound thank you to the Greater Kanawha Valley Foundation, because without their support, Brickscape is certainly a much added benefit to Festival, and we're very thankful for the 4 artists and Jack for making this pivot with us and making this happen and showing you all their incredible installations. I know that each and every one of you out there have been able to enjoy their work, and if you're catching this on replay, I encourage you to check out the Festival YouTube channel to watch all 4 of the installation pieces by our 4 artists today. Now I'm going to introduce the project director, Jack O'Hearn. He is the founder and project director for Brickscape Artist Residency and Exhibition. He's been a professional artist for 15 years, starting out as a painter and moving to multimedia installation art. Over the past 5 years, his work has been primarily focused on public and community-based projects. He's also the Community Arts Coordinator at the West Virginia State Arts Office, which is housed in the West Virginia Department of Arts, Culture, and History. Jack earned his MFA degree from the University of Wisconsin and his BFA from Lesley University. And I will now turn it over to Jack.
Thanks, Maria. So welcome to our discussion, and thank you for watching. It should be a good discussion. I just want to talk a little bit first about Brickscape and the sort of changes that we had this year. So Brickscape Artist Residency is typically a 5-week residency program where we invite artists to submit proposals for site-specific installation art in vacant historical buildings in downtown Charleston. Now, of course, this year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we at first, it was a summer residency that we ended up postponing. And then when it came to fall, we were saying, we can either not do this or we could go virtual, and we didn't want to not do it. So we went virtual and we talked to the artists about it, and we were able to move forward. And it was a very different experience and a very different result, but still very rewarding and interesting. So I hope everyone who's viewing has had a chance to view the videos on Festival's YouTube channel, the videos that each of these artists created of their work. I'm now going to introduce each artist, and after I introduce, I'll get into some questions, and I'll ask them a few questions as a group and then individually, and then we'll sort of open it up. If anybody who's viewing has questions, they can type that into the chat, and I'll ask the artist. So first want to introduce Craig Auge, who's born and raised in Charleston, West Virginia. Craig is now based in Kansas City, Missouri. Often using salvage and found objects, his work explores the relationship between material, shape, color, and gesture to activate a sense of deja vu. He He has exhibited work throughout the US and has been featured in several print and digital publications. He's currently a Charlotte Street Foundation studio resident in Kansas City and an upcoming resident at Elsewhere Museum in Greensboro, North Carolina. Next, I'll introduce Luisa Caldwell. Luisa is a multidisciplinary artist working between public art installation, drawing, and craft. She's exhibited at the Brooklyn Museum of Art, Boca Raton Museum of Art, Cal State Los Angeles Silverman Gallery, and Malakoff Center Paris. Caldwell has a BA in art history from the University of Iowa and continued in the MFA sculpture program. She lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. And Joshua Gambetta. Joshua is originally from a suburb of Portland, Oregon. Now Josh calls Thomas and Davis, West Virginia, his home, and has called that his home for several years. He studied both fine arts and social work at Garrett College and Frostburg State University while earning a BFA in 2010 with a focus on both printmaking and sculpture. And finally, Nicole Westfall, who is originally from West Virginia, but currently lives on the western side of the United States. Nicole has been working as a muralist with a focus on bringing magical scenery into unexpected places. She graduated from West Virginia State University with a concentration in drawing and has been doing pretty much everything other than illustration ever since. So welcome, panel of artists, Brickscape artists. And I'm going to start by just talking about how this project got started and the changes that were made. And so from the beginning, it was clear that this wasn't going to be like anything you've ever done, given the fact that you would be creating an installation in your own space and the intended audience would only be able to experience the work through a short, like 2 to 3 minute video of that you capture of your piece. I feel like that was really unique. And I'll have to admit, you know, when I watched the videos, I didn't know what to expect because I've never done it this way either. And the first time I watched them, I didn't know what to make of them, but I felt like, you know, that's like going into the installation and walking right out. You need to spend some time there to really appreciate and understand the work. So after watching the video a few times, you know, I think just even my second, third time around, I've watched the video, each video about, you know, 6 or 7 times now. And after a few times, I really got to understand the work and really interpret it for myself and kind of extract some meaning from it and really appreciate it. So that's what it was like to view the work for me, but I want to hear about what it was like to make it and go through this process about, you know, creating the videos of your installations. So I was just wondering if any of you want to talk about some of those challenges that you faced that might have been unique to this project.
Well, I guess I can start. So it was an interesting experience to try to travel to Charleston from Thomas and Davis, West Virginia. I did it about 2 or 3 times to kind of get a feel for the city because I wanted to go at this whole thing kind of cold and just kind of like show my observations of the city without a whole lot of background information to it. Because I've only been to the city a few times. It was quite an interesting challenge to try to put something together. I mean, the video itself wasn't too difficult, but I think my hardest part for me was because mine was based on a projection, was trying to get a decent image of it in a darkened room was a little bit of a challenge to try to get that to work appropriately. Yeah, that's about the biggest challenge I had was that.
Well, for me, what happened with this residency, it became kind of a two-part thing. First part, I spent 3 weeks doing the installation and then left enough time to make what a good video. I thought a presentable video. I'm not a video artist by any means, so it was important to, have enough time to make a good video. And what was fun is that it went from being kind of straight documentation, which is probably what I thought would have been expected or what I expected to make, to more experimental, more into the video art realm. So that was really a learning process, and I really enjoyed that aspect, which would not have happened if we hadn't gone virtual.
I can second that. The video realm was definitely new for me, as it was for, I think, all of us. And with work that I have done in the past and the way I usually work, it is usually very tactile. It's very kind of there's some essence in the details when you're right in front of it, with the kind of materials that I use and find. And I also sometimes it gets a little minimal. Sometimes I really lean into the maximalist kind of overwhelm, and this installation definitely went there. So in the absence of being surrounded by this sort of cacophony of imagery, I really decided to lean into these particular video effects, which kind of, I hoped, kind of made it sort of seem like you were there in a way to get a certain feeling that I was hopeful that you would get if you had been standing there. And also I was kind of, in my research, I was looking back at some actual old videos, VHS videos of a particular time period. And so that kind of connected as well. And, but I really was happy in the end with myself for being able to edit this video and kind of have this new knowledge about making a video. And I know in the past, some critiques I've gotten with certain things that have like implied movement. Oh, this would be really cool if it was like animated. If it hadn't been for this experience, I wouldn't feel like I could do that. But now I feel like, oh, there's so many things that I could try now to actually, like, I know how to do the basics at least, to maybe, do more video art or even, I don't know, animating some of the work in some way. So I'm excited for that.
Yes, I of course struggled with the video aspect of this when we decided to go virtual. I thought it was quite terrifying, because, like the others have said, I just expected this project to be something that would be experienced and interacted with physically. And once we decided that it was going virtually, I, for some reason, thought, okay, well, this is going to be mainly a video, and I want to make something that's interesting for people to view for at least 2 minutes instead of making an actual installation. And I wouldn't say that I regret it, but it definitely stressed me out the whole time, because I have no experience with video work either. But it was incredible to see it come together and try to make a story out of something. I hadn't chosen a spot to install until the last day. And so with knowing that, I think that I would change that aspect of it. That was the biggest challenge that I had to deal with, was trying to set everything up and video it all in the same day without losing light, because it was probably around 5 hours of videoing and trying to get some good footage.
Great, thanks. That's great to hear. I feel like, I like that you're stressed out because, that's what this is about, is getting you outside your comfort zone. And, I love, previous year we did Brickscape there's a handful of artists that had never done a site-specific installation art piece before, and that's the time that I really enjoy seeing that somebody doing something new that they've never done before, and going through that struggle of learning, just kind of, I don't know, learning and evolving with the project. And yeah, I feel like you all had to do that this time because it was new for everybody. So I enjoyed watching everybody's experience. And I think your videos came out great. I think this has already been touched on, but my next question was, what did you gain from this experience? Or was there anything that you learned or discovered about yourself or your work that you didn't expect? So if a few of you have already kind of touched on some of this, and feel free to repeat yourself, but I was wondering if we could each go by and go around again and talk about that.
Same order or different order?
Same order is fine. That helps.
I guess that would be me. So what did I learn from this? Well, basically, I mean, I've been a resident of West Virginia for about 6 years now, and I've been really curious about exploring the state capitol and just seeing what all Charleston has to offer, since I haven't been very, very much. So that's one thing that I was very keen on being able to do, was to just see what the state capitol is about. And I had a fantastic time walking around the city and seeing all the murals. It is such a colorful city with like all the public art everywhere. There was that moving tree. I forget what building it's in front of. And then I was also keen to check out there was an LGBT mural that just went into downtown recently, and then exploring some of the really interesting pylon murals. So I was really excited to be able to see the vast amount of public art that was going on in the state capitol. As far as learning about myself, it was really nice to be able to lean on my local community, because where I did my installation was in a local gallery / multi-use art space in Thomas, West Virginia, called Great Project Gradient art space. It was really nice to be able to lean on my local community to be able to put this thing together. Unfortunately, I only had like 2 days to try to actually install everything and get my videos together and stuff, because of the tight framework in which I had to work right at the end there. But yeah, so it's just kind of like relearning the fantastic community that I have out here in West Virginia, and to be able to explore a new one was really, really fascinating, and definitely an experience I will always cherish. And I look forward to exploring more of Charleston.
Thanks, Josh.
Well, for me, I made a very different installation than what I would have done. I think if the residency had been in real life in Charleston, I would have found some sort of reclaimed material and quantity that related to me somehow to West Virginia. But because I couldn't do that, and I was here in Brooklyn, what I decided to do was mine my ephemera, like go through old boxes and look for photographs, memorabilia, things from high school, posters from concert ticket stubs, whatever I could find from my past, from West Virginia. I was born in Charleston, but not really raised, though we moved back when I started 10th grade. So I ended up graduating I went 2 years to Stonewall Jackson and then graduated from Dunbar High, but haven't really spent a lot of time there since. So for me, what this residency did, and going back through all these deep and rich memories, and on 6 generations of West Virginians, how deeply I love West Virginia, the state, how it's my roots. It's ingrained in me whether I get to visit there a lot or not. I think about all my family. I knew my great grandmother, and I even knew a great aunt. And to think about both these women were born in the 19th century. Like, I knew people who were born in the 1800s. That kind of blows my mind. So that I loved reconnecting, thinking about this, you know, my own personal history and how it relates to a state and a country and to a nature and to people. So that was a remarkable experience, and that it would have happened differently if I had gone. So it was very personal journey here in my little Brooklyn room, you know, thinking about West Virginia. So I appreciated it very much, that aspect.
That's great to hear. Craig?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, so many things that I learned through the process. I think I'm kind of some of what Luisa just said sort of rings true. Of course, some of the work that we do too kind of is coming from maybe a similar place at times. So I think I had an idea that had it been local, that I would have certainly used local ephemera and sort of local material that sort of already has the energy and the actual color and, you know, essence of the place. And I wasn't totally able to do that, obviously, because I have sort of materials that I use or materials that I gathered kind of more as like stand-ins for certain, you know, a certain look that I wanted or something. But I think I kind of, I just learned a lot about how I approach the idea of installation, or how I sort of thought I would approach installation, and how I ended up approaching it was kind of its own journey. And it's definitely given me a lot of ideas for future projects. I think definitely along the way, I was just keying into a lot of the ideas of the aesthetic sort of cues that I have taken in a lot of my work while putting together this installation from the area, and how actually not just thinking about this installation, but it made me realize that a lot of the work I make is sort of about Charleston in a way. And I don't know if that kind of makes full sense to people listening, but as I'm sort of distilling things down into their sort of essence of sort of like a certain, if I was here, sort of certain things that have a certain patina, you know, or a certain age to them from an old building or something, it's like might be recognizable here in the moment, to sort of try to find that in another place, in another city, or in another, you know, and as sort of like a representation of that. It really made me realize the aesthetic sort of cues that I pull from the city, and just the mix of architecture, and just, I don't know, that there's a sort of color palette in my mind. So yeah, it was just interesting to sort of see how it all kind of made me realize it comes back to me being from here. Everything that I make and everything that I do actually has always been about this place in some way. So
When did you move away?
Well, I moved away, and I've moved back a couple times since probably like 2002. So, but I've been away now for 7 or 8 years. So, and a lot has changed, and certainly, yeah, there's a lot that's the same, but a lot has changed. But yeah, again, working off memory, as Luisa said too, a very different experience. You know, just strictly working off memory and sort of the distortions there was an interesting process.
For me, I think that I learned to explore a lot with this residency, and different ways of working. I needed to let go of control a lot in the situation. From the beginning, I had thought that I would make this installation to feel really homey in this beautiful space and take pieces from old sweaters and make these rugs and everything. And then even after deciding that we were going to do it this way, I had so many different ideas that I was going to try to do until ending on the final. I think that I had to learn how to work in a bigger space more broadly instead of being so caught up in details. Even like the shelving that I made was made out of cardboard. So I had to learn to keep all of the materials that I wanted, to grab them when I could instead of hoarding all of them and keeping them like I had before. I had access to all of these things because I'm traveling, so everything had to fit in my car. And also, I think with this experience, the biggest thing that I relearned is how important it is to have people to talk to and bounce ideas off of and brainstorming, because since I've been out of school, it's pretty much been, this is the idea I want. You go through your own head and decide what to do and then create it. So I think that was really important for this experience. Oh, I think you're muted, Jack.
Oh, sorry. I was bound to do that eventually. So people are aware you were creating your installation while you were traveling across the country. Can you talk about your travels and where you started and where you went to? And
Yeah. So when we first heard about doing the residency, when we decided in summer, I was in Rifle, Colorado. I had been living there for a year. And then when we postponed to fall, I was in the middle of moving to Portland. So I had just moved into Portland, Oregon, and then the wildfires started going crazy. And so I evacuated, and I was moving some things, hardly anything, because I drive a tiny car, from Portland to Denver. So yeah, it was interesting to try to do everything while on the move. And then I had installed at a state park right outside of Denver.
definitely a unique experience.
Yeah.
And you're also from here. Are you from Charleston? I forget. And how long were you here before you left, or what's your relationship to Charleston or West Virginia?
So I grew up in West Virginia. So I grew up about 45 minutes outside of Charleston, on the border between Kanawha and Clay County. So I went to school in Clay, and I grew up, I'd say the closest town is Clendenin, which was hit by the flood in 2016, the big flood, and lost a lot of the town. But I moved to Charleston when I started going to school at WVSU. So I was living in Charleston from 2016 until 2019, 18 is when I moved out. So just recently.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
It's made for such an interesting dynamic. Amongst the artists, we have 3 artists that are living outside of West Virginia right now, who all have personal ties to the Charleston area. And then we have one artist, and Josh, who lives in West Virginia, but has barely been to Charleston, only been here a few times, is originally from Oregon. And he's the one person who, since he was here, he got to come down physically, be in Charleston, which worked out because he was the only one who couldn't delve into memories of the place and had to come, and that really helped. I feel like that really helped him. And you all, it's really cool that we ended up with this group of artists that were either in proximity to or had some kind of personal connection to the Charleston area. So I'm going to ask each of you a question about your piece. So I'm going to start with Luisa. in your video, you talk about invoking the Appalachian landscape, and the work definitely does that. But I also think it invokes a certain aesthetic. I'm hesitant to say an Appalachian aesthetic because I think it would undermine the diversity of the region. But some words that come to mind are backcountry, cabin, holler, homestead. And I can kind of visualize a sort of, I don't know, a house in the woods somewhere when I'm seeing your installation, and what the culture or particularly what the aesthetic and the design of those spaces are. And that's the sort of feeling that it gives me. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about those specific places that you visited as a kid. Where exactly in West Virginia were they? Were they in an urban area? Were they up a holler somewhere? And what did they feel like? And did the aesthetic of those places you remembered play a role in creating your piece?
Absolutely. You described the feeling I was after perfectly. Cabin in the woods. My great Aunt Susie lived in a log cabin up a hill, up in a holler where many of my other relatives lived, including my great grandmother. We called her Dulu. She lived in off of West Washington Street on Perry Lane, along with Aunt Judy, Aunt Margaret Perry, and Uncle Earl, and others. So, and the way I remember these houses surrounded by trees, gardens were important. This, the image you see on the wall here is a stock image of West Virginia forest, which I manipulated and reproduced in multiples and then adhered to the wall. And the idea about that is that, so how I remember these homes being so close to nature, you'd walk out the door. I mean, it was almost like the nature was coming in. They were humble homes, clean, but not that they weren't maintained, but they were old, very old houses to begin with, even yes. So, and then thinking about the objects that were inside, I wanted something that I chose to make objects that I found to be very Appalachian, defined by me, because they were first seen by me in West Virginia. I carved 70 apples into little faces and then dried them to make dried apple heads, which I first saw at a craft fair when I was about 8 with my grandmother Nanny in Beckley. I'd never seen them anywhere else, and it always stuck with me. All of my family had these giant rag rugs, so I made an oversized braid that then I let ramble around the room. I don't know, if you've seen the video, but here's a part of it. And it's much larger than the braid of what they braid for a rag rug. So thinking about the arts and crafts of West Virginia was very important for this piece. The gazing globe I first saw at my Aunt Judy's house. I'd never seen them anywhere else. And I still think that they're very more common to the East and Northeast, possibly. I was upstate in Hudson Valley a few days ago, and I actually spotted one. I'm like, wow, I guess, it's part of Appalachia, right? The whole chain. So I don't know if I answered your question, but yes, it's very, the idea of folk is very important to this piece. Folk as kinfolk, as family. And I think I'm going to shout out to my cousin Mark, who I hear is watching from Charleston.
All right. Thanks, Luisa.
Thank you.
So next I want to ask a question for Craig. In your video, you talk about DIY culture in the 90s and how your generation was finding a new aesthetic. this is really interesting to me because I often think about DIY culture and how that's shifted over the past several decades. I feel like in the 60s and 70s, DIY was very centered around the hippie movement. And then, in the past 20 years, it's become very mainstream. I think, there's like a DIY magazine on your supermarket magazine shelf. There's Martha Stewart, Pinterest, TV reality shows, refurbishing things. And so I feel like DIY culture right now, when you think about it, is very like kind of, I don't know, homeowners who remake their kind of find things and refurbish them and things like that. And where I, like you, grew up in the 90s, and I feel like in the 80s and 90s, DIY culture was more associated with the underground, like punk rock and grunge scenes, which I happened to be a part of and grew up in. And I feel like your installation and the video that you created definitely invoke a nostalgia for that aesthetic. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the culture you grew up in, some of the places that you spent time in here in Charleston, maybe your favorite hangout spots as a teenager, what kind of music or art you were into, and what was the scene like for a teenager in Charleston in the 90s?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great cue up for the whole sort of concept of the installation that I ended up creating for this. Again, kind of thinking about what I would have done versus okay, now I need to sort of pivot. Let me anchor it in something a little bit more, even though I'm pretty abstract typically. I wanted to kind of anchor it in a somewhat of a more specific kind of history, sort of, that was specific to me. And something that was really impactful was my teen years in Charleston. And it was because I was sort of part of this kind of cusp generation, Generation X to millennial. And I was able to really enjoy a lot of that sort of grunge, DIY punk culture that was happening here. It was actually very robust, I think, as Charleston as sort of the city, along maybe with Huntington in the state, that's very rural. There was quite a amazing sort of DIY music scene. It was more the DIY thing, like you said. It was, for us, it was more about the music and the art. There was a lot of theater, a lot of like youth theater as well that I was involved in. But particularly now, the title of the installation, Uncommon Ground, also references a really specific place that was very meaningful to a lot of youth, called Common Grounds, which was a coffee house on Summer Street that was pretty much existed just kind of through all the 90s. And it was great. They would have, band slam nights, and it was just, they do little weird theater and poetry readings. And I think, probably in my mind, I don't know if this is totally true. In my mind, it was sort of like it was always all ages. I think they probably served alcohol, but in my mind, it was like an alcohol-free, drug-free, it was like, it was safe. It was a safe place to like go as a teenager. And, it was just such a cool hangout spot, just really vibrant. And then of course, sort of thinking about sort of the mall culture, which is really different now, but it was sort of peak mall culture, mid to late 90s, there at the Town Center Mall. So you had this almost sort of like this corridor between Common Grounds on Summer Street and the Town Center Mall that was just always bustling with teenagers, and just experimenting with fashion and experimenting with music and just feeling free. And while sort of the backdrop was sort of a city that was sort of kind of maybe not how it had been for a while. So it was a little bit sleepy. There were a lot of stores kind of, you know, about to fold up or folding up. And so it actually was a really interesting time for us as youth, kind of being able to really, as I stated, you know, it was sort of like a playground in a way. And it was always felt very safe too. But just a really interesting time to like experiment and explore. And then you also had the Capitol Center Theater, where there was a lot of theater down on Summer Street. So it was sort of this great area of just activity, and Taylor Books had just opened and all that. So yeah, it was really interesting, that sense of DIY, just like we get to sort of, and this idea that Charleston was a city that if you wanted to try something, do something creative, you totally could. You had the freedom to do that. I, with several friends, you know, a couple of times we rented out an old office space and did art exhibits, and it was just you could do whatever you wanted to do. So that was really exciting. And also I had the wonderful experience as a teenager as well to get to know some of these older establishments and have really an intergenerational experience with a lot of folks that were probably in their 80s or maybe even 90s that were hanging on to these old establishments, like the Strand, or there was a great place called Lance's. It was like this 5-story, like sort of thrift store. You know, it was kind of just weird, these weird stores that had maybe were one thing that had become something totally different by the time the 90s rolled around to kind of hang on. But all these great antique stores that aren't around downtown anymore. So it was that was kind of what I was going for, to kind of, I don't know, it's embody all of that and kind of pull that all together, and then sort of through the somewhat of a punk rock lens or a grunge lens, literally, figuratively, with the video. So yeah, it was a great time to be a teenager in Charleston.
Cool, thanks. I feel like it's interesting to hear, because I'm not from here, and I moved here to West Virginia 4 years ago, and so I don't know what it was like in the 90s. It sounds like a good place to grow up, and I can say, you know, imagine a lot's changed, but the idea that you can do anything as an artist, I feel like it's still there, and at least that's how I feel here. And I feel like Brickscape is a testament to that. To be able to come here and do this, I've kind of felt that way similarly about this town, and that you know, if I have some crazy idea I want to do, you know, I could probably get it done and have some support. So that was really cool to hear. So next I'll go to Nicole. Nicole, in your video, you have this animal that is spewing up these soft cylindrical forms that then form themselves into this sort of monument. And this is your playful artistic portrayal of your memories of hoarding and poverty in West Virginia. And so I have a few different questions for you that you can answer one at a time. First, what is, because I know what the animal is, but I'm not sure if everybody will. Can you say what the animal is and why you chose that animal?
Yes. First, I'm going to apologize because I've been acting crazy for the last 10 minutes because I've been attacked by a fly, and I really regret like not killing it earlier. But just so you know, if I'm waving and everything, that's it. The tiger, or the animal I made was a tiger. It's been pretty consistent in my line of work because it's more specifically a traditional Korean tiger, which is always portrayed as being like really silly with these crazy eyes, and they have these really wild teeth that just kind of come out everywhere. And I like to use it as a nod to my mother and my heritage because I'm Korean American.
Cool, thanks. And thinking about form, all the forms you created are very soft and gentle feeling.
Mhm.
Backdrop is much more harsh in shape and texture. And I was wondering if there's an intention behind that, or what the significance of those, the materials you were using.
The materials that I chose fabric because that's what I feel most comfortable working with, but also I wanted to marry both traditional Appalachian type of or Southern quilting with Korean quilting, which is why I used silk for the tiger and then more of a cotton for the forms. I also feel like I have this romantic vision, or that's how I view West Virginia now. Even just being gone for a year, a little over a year, I look at it and I view it as this beautiful, mystical place that I miss dearly. And even with the imagery that I chose something that not everyone loves, because it is all of this trash that floods like these beautiful landscapes. But I wanted to look at that image in a more playful way rather than seeing that it's gross or it's something that needs to be cleaned up and should be shameful.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're when at the end of the video, I was really, my mind went to a monument. This thing, was created that was really monumental. And I was wondering, if that was your idea behind it, that form at the end, and what the significance of that was.
Yeah, it was, because I feel like these sides they're just flooded with things that people want to keep around. And so the structure that I made, I wanted it to mirror a bookshelf, because I feel like the bookshelf is used as a part of a home to house things that you want to look at, but you don't necessarily use or aren't functioning every day. But you want to keep them, you don't want to get rid of them. It's just in case you want to use it, you want to read that book at some point. The reason that the top of the bookcase was rounded is because I wanted it to kind of mimic how a hill would look. And that's why it was painted green as well. That's why. But I wanted it to be this thing that the tiger was puking up and creating and then would protect and keep.
Yeah, that protection explains why the tiger kind of comes down and hugs it and puts its teeth on it, and it's protecting it. Cool. Well, thank you, Nicole. So now I'll ask Josh. Watching your video and listening to the soundtrack, there's a monotony that's at play. The repeated sound of footsteps, or the repeated sound of the crosswalk signal, the soft hum of the motors, and then you have this figure who's just walking and walking and walking. And that's kind of what you get at first glance, but when you really look at it and you pay attention and you get into the details, you see, really interesting historic architecture, beautiful painted murals. There's a book sharing rocket ship in there. And for me personally, this, there's also the fact that these forms are rising in the installation. And I think there's some symbolism to that for me. And so it speaks to me how at first glance, it might not seem like the city has progressed much since its heyday and the sort of kind of struggles that it faced. But when you look closely and learn about the history, you realize that the city has really come a long way. And a lot has changed. And although change seems what progress seems somewhat slow at times, it has been in a state of progress for a long time and still is. And then, these are just a few of my thoughts when I watch it, and my kind of what I've learned about the city, talking to people about its history before I got here, and what I've seen over the past 4 years. I'm interested in hearing some of your thoughts that were going through your mind as you were walking the streets filming and photographing, and also as you were creating the piece.
Yeah, it was a very weird experience to like walk through Charleston in the middle of COVID. My general feeling was it was a very quiet city. There wasn't a lot of like outdoor experiences, not a lot of outdoor people walking around and stuff. So pretty much the soundtrack is just, I put a microphone in my backpack as I was walking around. So those are my footsteps walking through the city. And it's also the hum and the crosswalks that was mostly the sounds that I heard going through. Then I also have the pedestrian walking through the city as well. So really the whole piece kind of mimics a trip that I took through Charleston. And so starting at the river and walking through and seeing all the historic buildings. And I don't know if you noticed that in some parts of it, as the murals start to like grow up and come into view, there's a certain pulsing that happens with the video. And my thought on that was that, it seems that the city really comes to life with its art and creativity. So yeah, I see Charleston as a city that has had a previous heyday and maybe is in decline from that. But one of the really beautiful things that I saw of Charleston is that in that vacuum and in the infrastructure that was already built, that the various creative communities in Charleston have been able to reclaim those kind of institutions and be able to turn them into something else more, to like bring some life and energy back into the city. So I was really keen in kind of representing that. The other thing is that in the installation, it's projected light onto a wall, and I built that little corner recess in because I really wanted to play with the idea of, in addition to the struggles of the city, it's not like a straight on view hitting a wall. It's there's an obstruction there, but it still continues to develop. Even with an obstruction, you find a way to get around it and use it to your advantage in some regards. So that was some of my thinking behind how it was put together. And I also really just love the idea of using projection and making a video that's not like a straight box. I liked the idea that the edges were kind of like, almost towering up in kind of a zigzaggy kind of blocks building on top of each other.
Cool, thanks. So that was really interesting to hear. So those are all the questions that I have. And if anybody watching this live has any questions for all of the artists or any one of the artists, feel free. I'll just leave a few more minutes. If you have any questions, you can write it in the chat on the YouTube, in the YouTube chat, and I'll relay those to the artists. Okay, so we got a couple questions. Are all the videos available to view? And yes, they are. And actually, it would help if, Maria, if you're listening, can you, could you please type the link into the YouTube chat so people can access it there that are watching now? And so if you go to YouTube and you look up Festival Charleston, they have their own channel, and you can find all the videos there, along with the other programming that they have for the fall festival that they've been doing this week. And so another question was, how has your practice changed since the start of 2020? I'm guessing that implies the sort of changes of that, due to COVID. But yeah, any thoughts on that?
Well, I like taking my time. I actually was super productive, interestingly enough, during the quarantine period. We had to really hunker down here in New York City. And, it was interesting not having to go to a lot of openings, not being able to go to galleries. Pretty much all I did was make art. So I learned something in that experience, Oh, it's just better not to run around so much, maybe for me personally.
For me, I haven't really made anything other than doing this residency. I think I've painted 2 murals and that was it. I haven't really had the emotional energy, I think, other than doing this. It's felt kind of hard since the beginning, since April. It's just kind of felt daunting, I think. And so I've been trying to get more outside, and that's pretty much all that I've been doing since 2020 has begun.
Yeah, I scaled way back in terms of actual scale, doing a lot of smaller things, starting to get more kind of minimal and quiet with the work. Kind of maybe that has to do with also slowing down or just really, really just sort of streamlining a process, which made this residency again really interesting because it was sort of everything. It was sort of an opportunity to kind of be a little bit more explosive for the first time since March or before, and so that was interesting. Just the both sides of that.
So pretty much for me, since 2020, especially with the COVID, I have, there's less gallery showings and less opportunity to be able to show places for it, but it's also caused me to explore more of like what can be done with technology in virtual spaces. The other thing is my production has probably slowed down because my day job has increased since COVID, since I work in a tourist economy, and my day job as a bartender has boosted because everyone's traveling out here to escape the city. So unfortunately, I've not had as much time to devote to my practice.
Thanks, everyone. Another question from someone viewing was, for those of you who are not, or those of you who are from here but live somewhere else, what does Charleston have? Is there anything that Charleston has that the places where you currently live might not? And if you are here but you are from somewhere else, same question applies. What does Charleston have that maybe where you're from didn't, if anything?
So I'd have to say for me, the times that I've spent in the city, the whole creative community that I've encountered in Charleston is a very accepting and embracing community from everyone that I've met. Very interested in getting to know you and whatnot, and trying to embrace and like show what's going on and stuff. Very very warm and embracing community compared to other places I've been, where the creative community can be a little insular and somewhat arrogant at times. So I've been very impressed with Charleston in that regard.
Well, for me, I did visit for a few days about 3 years ago, and I drove around a lot. And well, so I've lived in Brooklyn now for 32 years. I moved here as a young artist in '88. And when I moved here, it was pretty desolate, and Williamsburg was nothing but bombed out industrial buildings, vacant. It was really easy to get a big space for inexpensive, and everything's changed. That's completely changed. So what was interesting to me about visiting Charleston is seeing abandoned buildings, seeing vacant spaces that, as a young artist, and well, as an artist, that was very exciting. I think that what I saw was unlimited opportunity, to get a great space for inexpensive and set up a studio, I think, is what I like to dream about when I see empty buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends that live, people I went to school with and stuff live in different areas around the country. And I would say, if you're an artist and you want opportunity to do work, like, and just grow as an artist, come to Charleston. Or, before here I was living in South Bend, Indiana, and it was somewhat similar. I think a lot of the, smaller cities around the country that have a lot of vacant buildings don't have a sort of gallery district or something like that. And, they're hungry for art, and there's a lot of people that are going to support you and help make things happen for you. And things are less expensive. And I feel like, particularly for young artists, it's great to get out, which I think, an older generation's view is, if you graduate from a program, you got to go straight to New York. And now I feel like a lot of people are thinking, once you graduate, you got to get out. You got to get out to the middle of the country, to these smaller towns and cities, because there is a lot of opportunity here because of the situation.
I'll just choose one other thing about here. What other thing about Charleston that I like? I'm actually in Charleston right now, after all, briefly. But what I really love is, and I've lived several different places. It is a smaller city, but it is a city, and it has a metropolitan energy, and even that urban sort of decay or some of the maybe blight, it is appealing to me as an artist, for one thing, because I really find the beauty in those things as well. But also it does make it feel like you are in an urban area, yet within minutes you can be in the deep woods, or way down in a holler, or way down, in a creek, and not hear a thing, or up on a mountaintop with the most amazing view. I mean, like 5 minutes or less. And it's very uniquely Appalachian. It's like a very unique forest experience with that sort of sweet smell. And so you have it all here. And I've never been any place or lived any place that actually has that condensed. And I actually think it really has informed my work and continues to inform my work. And it's sort of this density of West Virginia being kind of packed in there. There's a lot packed in here. And I feel like the same is true of Charleston. There's a lot packed into a really small space. And also you can be way out in the middle of the deep woods in just a few minutes, which also feels very, it's such a rich experience in that way. have both the country and the city just sort of smashed together. So that feels very uniquely Charleston.
And I just want to say that I agree with Jack. And it's crazy the supportive artist community that you have in Charleston, and the sense of humble and kind energy with all of these creative people. And that's something that I haven't found elsewhere. It's just how everyone wants to see each other succeed, and it's not so much fighting for the limelight or getting a job, and everyone wants to see someone do something good for that community.
Cool, good answers. So if this continues to be our way of life for the unforeseeable future, will your art start to evolve into something different? Or has it already started to do that?
Well, I've been playing with, sorry, Luisa. So I've been playing with video imagery anyways for the last several years. And it's been actually quite an interesting thing to realize that I can take my image making into a virtual realm. So I think that that's something that I will definitely be continuing in. And I am curious to explore more projection-based pieces outdoors, which on the upside to that is it's easier to create social distancing when you're outdoors. So I'll probably continue with that, especially even if we get through this pandemic. I think that that's definitely a direction I'll continue to be going in.
Well, I agree. And what Craig said before about not having made videos before, but enjoying it, and possibly, I don't know any of the programs. I actually had my friend Carlton Bright help me with the video, but it definitely was intriguing and fun to sit there and edit. So what I will do is, well, actually, I hope that we go back to in real life viewing, because there's just nothing like the tactile, the realness of art. And while Zoom is great, digital is great, online is great, it's not the only way. Though I think I want to learn iMovie. So maybe make more videos too, experiment. So that's been really cool about this residency, is opening my mind towards video making. So even in the future, what I'd like to do if I do an installation is make a concise, completed, orchestrated video for it, not just still photographs. So that was very, very cool experience with this.
When I founded this residency 2 years ago, I never thought that it would be a place for artists to begin to be introduced to working in video. Like, wasn't on my radar really. But so I don't know. It's kind of cool though. I like it.
Yeah, the trajectory that I was on would kind of like, I feel like, set me up for give me the space here in old Charleston building to, and it was like, wow, this is just tailor-made for me. And I'm sure we all felt like that from where we had come from. So I never would have thought video, but it is interesting. I mean, I had previously, just before, well, somehow through the pandemic times with a collaborator, I had sort of given over some collages for another artist to kind of animate and render and sort of give actual movement in the form of video. And so I was sort of waiting for that to kind of come back to me whenever. And then lo and behold, through the process of this, now I know iMovie. I know the basics at least of that. And I'm like, what am I waiting for? I can go ahead and start trying some other things on my own. and that'll still be there too, maybe. But yeah, I can start doing that now. I never would have thought that was something that I could do, but yeah, you know, getting the basics down is very nice. And I will just say too, I too hope for in-person viewings again, but I now have been able to like have some art experiences where we skipped the big fancy openings, and I personally I'm okay with that, or slash really have gotten into this idea of really meeting people for appointments and you know, having those one-on-one conversations. I realized that had been missing before all of this for me. So I would like to keep that model, whether or not these big openings come back or not. I may just continue to be available to have the one-on-one way more than I ever thought I wanted to or needed to before. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, those being able to make an appointment for one-on-one with the artists and go see their show, like that's really great. I never thought about that before. And yeah, I would totally do that if I did a in-person exhibition again.
I think that what I'm getting from this and how my practice will change is now I have the confidence to set up a piece where it hasn't necessarily been given the permission to be at. So I'm really excited to explore that. It's something that I've wanted to do for a while, and finally this residency pushed me to do it. And so I think that setting up in the middle of nowhere or in alleys is in my future, I hope. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, last question we'll take is what's next for everyone?
Well, I'll start. I actually am doing a project, again, it went virtual, with CEC Arts Link, Art Prospect out of St. Petersburg, Russia. And I did a piece on my front fence. And you can go to their website, cecartslink.org, for a map of different artist projects worldwide. So that's happening now through the 18th. And then I'm supposed to go to a residency there, which was supposed to happen in September. And we're hoping for the new year when it's safe again. And meanwhile, I'll just be working in my studio, making in real life stuff, not giving up.
I think I've got a little project germinating in my head right now of creating some augmented reality digital prints and trying to put together in my head a possible showing. There's a gallery in Wheeling that I might try working through to try to realize this. So basically the idea is like these digital prints that you can view through your phone, the camera on your phone, and watch the video manifest within the frame of the print. So I think that's probably one of my next steps. And maybe trying to create some sort of, I have some friends that do kind of an experimental noise band, electronica band, and maybe try to do some sort of collaboration with them in regards to this show. And that's just kind of the little nugget that's germinating at the moment.
Well, for me, I'm not sure what will come next. So I'm open to whatever happens. I don't really have any other projects that are happening. And so, and I guess the US is my oyster right now since I'm traveling, and I hope that I can start making things and just setting them up in different places. So I guess stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I had just come off the heels of another show in the midst of this virtual residency, which in these times felt like amazing that we were able to pull that off either. And then we were able to complete this with, I think, really great success. And so I've got a few things out there in review in the cooker. We'll see what comes of that. But for now, I'm kind of gonna take the rest of the year, I think, easy. I as well will just continue to show up in my studio and keep experimenting. I've been doing some sort of street art installations, little sort of minor installations and little street interventions as part of my practice. So I'll keep probably experimenting with that in Kansas City and through my travels. And I have a residency in Greensboro, North Carolina that's been deferred to next year to be determined there. But sort of a similar setup to the original version of this, where you're sort of given access to a space and lots of cool stuff and memories and a lot of reclaimed materials. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope that works out. And other than that, yeah, just kind of taking it easy and just going to keep experimenting.
Cool. Thank you. And so thank you all for being here and discussing your projects and the residency and what it was like. I had a great experience with getting to know you all, and this little discussion that we've had has been like a perfect wrap up to the experience, and I got to learn some things and some perspective from you guys that I haven't heard before. So it's been really nice. For those viewing, you can go, if you go to brickscape.org, you can find links to all of these artists' websites. And from there, you can most likely find social media pages to follow. And if you want to keep up with what they're doing and see what they are doing next. You could also, and remember, if you want to watch the videos, they're posted in the chat, but also you can go to festivalcharleston.com or brickscape.org, and you can find links to the videos there, or you can look for the Festival Charleston page on YouTube and find the videos there as well. Brickscape is also on Facebook and on Instagram. I think the handle is just at Brickscape Residency. So that concludes our session, and thank you again. And we'll sign off, and thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks everyone for watching.